Um, and I didn't want to ask her. Like, I felt guilty. God kept telling me to ask Tish, ask Tish, ask Tish. And I was like, God, she's so busy. She's fixing to go to Israel. She's so busy, you can't ask her. And finally, how many weeks? Several weeks.
2 months.
2 months. It was 2 months. 2 months. I kept telling God, no, she's too busy. I can't bother her. She's got too much on her plate. And then finally, I said, Tish, I have to. I'm sorry. God's telling me to do this, and I can't ignore him anymore because it's you. And she's like, yeah, I thought you were never going to ask because I was ready from the get-go when you first told me God laid it on your heart. God, what took me so long? Because I'm stubborn like that. But, delayed obedience is disobedience. Anyway, y'all, please welcome Tish Makta.
Yeehaw, Tish. Hallelujah.
Hello.
Hello.
I am so excited to be here today. Excited almost isn't a big enough word. When she says God put us in the right place at the right time, it wasn't just that. So the Bible tells us that God promises to use everything for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Well, the right place and the right time was the transmission went out in my car, and I called her and I said, can you come get me? She came to Bateman, picked us up, took us to our house in Lockhart, and then we sat in her truck and talked for, I think, 3 hours. So I'm very excited. I'm going to turn my prop around. Today's message is called Puzzled, when the pieces of life don't exactly fall into place. By the way, as I was preparing for today, I found myself thinking, wow, I could really write a book on this topic. So I'm declaring right here, you guys are getting a preview of the book. All right, so we have a puzzle here. Puzzles are a lot of fun, right? When I was asking, I was getting ready to put this together, everybody in my family kept putting the puzzle together. And I kept saying, stop, I don't want every piece in the puzzle. But they're just fun, right? Well, as one day, I was driving home from church with my daughter, and we're just talking about life lessons. My daughter Violet, she's my middle child, and we're going to lunch, and the topic of the puzzle came up. And in that moment, I got this revelation. Our life is like a puzzle. And this works on 2 levels. First of all, if you think about all of us, and then you think about God, we're each a piece of his puzzle. It's this amazing picture that none of us have ever seen, but we're each a piece. We're created, specifically designed to go into one spot. Nobody else can fill that spot, only us. He created us uniquely. But there's another aspect to this puzzle metaphor. Think about your own life. Now think of it as a puzzle. You can't see the finished product. How many of y'all like to put together 1,000-piece puzzles with no picture? No way, right? That's impossible. Almost impossible. Well, our life is kind of like that. It's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and we don't get to see the picture. God has the picture. Not only that, he has every piece that goes into the puzzle. He knows exactly where to put them and exactly the right moment to put them. Okay? So, now, I don't know if you're like me, but I have a puzzle strategy. Okay? When I get a new puzzle, I count the pieces and make sure they didn't short me any. Then I sort them out. I take all the edge pieces and put them over to the side, and then I look for things, all the colors that are similar, or photos that are, photo attributes that are similar. I sort them out. Once I got it all sorted out, then I'll start working on the edges. Okay? If I'm on a team, I usually, because I'm kind of a leader personality, a take charge kind of person, I assign specific parts of the puzzle to the team so that we're not all up here working on the corner together. Let's get this baby done. So that's my puzzle strategy. I'm sure each of you probably has your own. And most of us, we developed this strategy somewhere around 9 or 10 years old. We figured out how to do puzzles. Okay, well, I don't know about you, but I also have this other part about puzzles. I have a built-in time limit. If I look at this puzzle and I estimate, okay, this should take 10 minutes. Well, if 10 minutes goes by and I'm not done with this puzzle, this is the result. I will just start cramming pieces anywhere just to get finished because I want to see the finished product. And that results in dog-eared pieces that get crammed in there, or messed up, counterfeit pieces, pieces that look like they're part of the puzzle, but maybe they're from a different puzzle. Because when you have kids at home, you end up with 1,000 puzzle pieces all over everywhere. Puzzle pieces that don't even belong. They're not even similar at all. But hey, I found it on the floor, so I'm putting it in the puzzle. So, life is kind of like a puzzle. I want to share a little bit of my puzzle story with you guys. Elizabeth and I met because her little son, Maverick, takes piano lessons from my daughter, Viola. And we kind of became fast friends. I'm the mom of 3 beautiful kids. My oldest is an airman, and she's married to a Marine. And, so when I walked in and saw the little service members in the box, I started crying. So, as I'm sharing today, I'm following Elizabeth's lead. I've got my tissues right here. I was the only child of parents who divorced when I was extremely young. And then they each remarried, okay? I was blessed. Because my mom married the man who raised me, and we had 38 amazing years together. Although I didn't always think it was amazing. I was saved at 6 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. I know that I was saved. And I joke and I tell people, God knew he had to get me early because he knew what the devil was going to try to do to me. And what do I mean by that? Well, I struggled with perfectionism, selfishness, self-centeredness, and a hallucinogenic mental illness for most of my life. I had 1,000 fears, and when you put all that together, that's a really volatile mixture that led me to gender confusion and full-on drug, alcohol, and sex addiction before I was even a teenager. So all of this kind of brewed together to where I began to think, my life will be better if I go somewhere else. So I became a serial runaway. Then eventually, after about 3 years of that, I decided, okay, running away is not an option. I don't want to do that anymore. It's too dangerous. I just thank God I was never sex trafficked. I did what I had to do to stay alive on the streets, but I can tell you I personally was never forced. So at age 17, the day after I graduated high school, I married the guy I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt was the wrong guy. He was not the one that God had for me, and I knew it. Everyone knew it. But I did it anyway because I wanted to get out. I wanted a different life, and I thought that that was the only way that I could be an adult and do it. See, I had fear. I had a lot of fear. Well, for the next 10 years, my life was filled with marital violence, eating disorders, and multiple suicide attempts. I can't even tell you how many times I've tried to commit suicide. It was just a mess. So by the time of my divorce at age 26, my puzzle wasn't even halfway completed, but my life was a full-on mess, a disaster. So it didn't stay that way. Obviously, I'm here today, right? Right. Thank God. So here's what I want to talk to you about today. See, I put a bunch of counterfeit puzzle pieces in my life puzzle, and I got impatient, and I put pieces that were part of my life puzzle. I jumped ahead, and I just shoved them anywhere that I thought they would fit. And what happened was, if this piece is mine, and it's a counterpiece, it's counterfeit, something that I've plugged in there, like drugs or alcohol, it blocks everything else. Because God is a gentleman. He will never violate our own free will. Never will. And so he waits. He says, all right, if you want to put that there, I can't stop you. I won't stop you. And then he waits, and he waits, and he whispered, are you ready to deal with that? Are you ready? Are you ready to take that out? Well, eventually, I became ready to take one piece out. I took one piece out. I left. I got divorced from the husband, God bless him, that I knew was the wrong guy. We had been married a very long time. By today's standards, we were married 10 years. But what looked to me like the end of the world at that moment turned out God met me right there. He met me there, and he helped me. And he slowly, over the course of the next 12 years, helped me to figure out which of these ragged, dog-eared puzzle pieces in my life didn't belong. And he would just whisper to my heart, are you ready? Let's take this one out. You see, Tish, this one looks like it goes there because it's the same color, it's the same theme, but it really doesn't. It's a counterfeit. You believed a lie from the devil that said that you ought to be a boy instead of a girl. Let's take that out. Okay? You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Trust me. Lean not on your understanding, lean on mine. Trust me. Okay? So, I left the violent marriage. I got help for the eating disorders. I met the man that God originally planned for me, and we fell madly in love and had 3 beautiful babies. And then, in 2009, my world came crashing down again. I had a psychotic break. I spent the majority of 2009 in mental hospitals and rehab. And my husband and I actually, right prior to that, had a recovery ministry here at FLBC, Celebrate Recovery, and I was the ministry leader. So you can imagine what that does when the ministry leader of Celebrate Recovery relapses and, is found wandering the streets telling people, my cell phone is threatening to kill me. That really does a number on you. The first hospitalization, it was all about just getting me conscious again. The second hospitalization, I don't know how many days I had been in the hospital, but I woke up, didn't know where I was. And I was sitting on that hospital bed, and I heard an audible voice of God say, I am still here. I am with you. And that changed everything. I still had to go to rehab. I still had quite a bit of stuff that I had to work through, but he was there. And so the most amazing part is, even in the midst of this, I lost my dad, but as I was taking care of him, I was sober, and I was able to be there for him. I've been delivered from alcohol and drug addiction, and I mean fully delivered, since March 16, 2009. Here's the bigger deal. I stand in awe when I say this. I dealt with a severe mental illness my entire life. But in December of 2010, I was completely released from psychiatric care for the first time in my entire life. Taken off all medication. And they basically said, you know, if you're not on medication, we can't help you. And I'm like, that's okay, I've been healed.
Yeah.
God healed me. You have other people to help. And so this December, you know, we're looking at, what year is this? 9 years of being completely released from psychiatric care, and I've never had another issue. I've never had another hallucination. I've never had any more depression. I've never had another mania other than when I drink too much caffeine. You know, caffeine's a good thing. God completely delivered me from both of those demons. But so even as all of these puzzle pieces, the counterfeits, are being taken out, there's still these big gaps. Why is that? Well, we have to think of, if we think of this as a metaphor for life, it's going to take God our whole life to complete the puzzle. Our whole life. So, what do we do in the wait? You know, I've had a lot of waits in this time since I've been delivered, and it's just a few of them. I've waited 7 years for my husband to come back to church after we closed Celebrate Recovery. 7 years. Some of you may still be waiting for your husband to come back to church. Don't give up. Don't quit. I'm still waiting for God to fulfill a dream of a new recovery ministry called Freedom School. I'm still waiting, but I believe that it's coming. I had to wait for family members to forgive me for being a tornado in their lives. God bless my mama. She's here today. I don't even understand. I can't even fathom how she dealt with me as a kid. Because I've been so blessed. I haven't even dealt with a tenth with my children, my 3 children, of what she dealt with just me. So, and then I also had to wait a very long time for the healing manifestation of my brain. But God did it. So I want to encourage you that in the storms of life and in the waits, God has been faithful, and he will be faithful. He will show us how to be content in every situation, whatever we have, whatever that situation is. And so one of the ways that we can learn how to be content in every situation is to look at the matriarchs, our mothers in the faith. I mean, as soon as Elizabeth started talking about the women's conference, I already knew matriarchs. It had already been in my spirit. So I want to very quickly highlight a few of them. Some of them made choices that put counterfeit pieces in their puzzle, took them farther away from God's plan for them. Others did it right, and I stand in awe of how they did it. So the first one we want to look at is Sarah. We find Sarah in Genesis chapters 12 through 21. Sarah was the wife of Abraham, okay? And Abraham, her husband, had a covenant promise from God that he would have a child through Sarah. But Sarah got impatient. She took things into her own hands, and her impatience, I would say, gave birth to discontent. Okay? What I have isn't good enough. Can't trust God. Well, that discontent opened the door for the devil to go in and whisper in her ear, here's the puzzle piece you need. And she forced Hagar into that slot that was rightfully hers by covenant. Well, if Hagar's in that spot, then God can't do anything with her just yet. And what happened was it took 14 years for her heart to get into the right place that she could remove the jealousy, the resentment, the discontentment, and get into the place to where she could receive that promise from God, receive the manifestation of Isaac. In the end, Ishmael and Hagar both had to be completely removed from Abraham and Sarah's lives. You know, that's a sad reality that a father has to say goodbye to his son. I thank God that he doesn't ask us to make those kinds of sacrifices. Leah, Genesis 29. Leah was forced into a loveless marriage with Jacob. So she, like most young girls, was expecting her husband to be the center of her life and to complete her puzzle. But is that man's job to fill that God-shaped hole in our heart? No, it's not. So how do we know that she was looking to her husband to do that? Well, let's look at the names of her children. First of all, her first son, Reuben, in Hebrew means, the Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me. That's in verse 32 of Genesis 29. In the next verse, she has another son, Simeon. His name means, the Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son. Uh-oh. Now she's expecting her children to fill that spot. All right, that's verse 33. In verse 34, Levi is born, and his name means, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons. Back to looking to Jacob. But you know what? Something changed between Levi and the birth of that 4th son. Does anybody know what his name was? Judah. Now I will praise the Lord. See? She started to look to God. She started to look up. She finally removed that victim puzzle piece and allowed God to place his own puzzle piece in that spot. Now we know that she fell back into old patterns, and she eventually gave her servant to her husband for baby-making purposes, simply to compete with her sister. But does that mean she lost all the ground that she gained? I don't think so, because in the very end, when Jacob died, he asked to be buried with Leah. That's a big statement. All right, let's look at David's wife, Michal. We find her in 1 Samuel 18, 19, 25, and 2 Samuel 3. Now, unlike Leah, 1 Samuel 18:44 tells us Michal was in love with David when she married him. She really was. She even helped him escape her murderous father. But you know what? That decision and the toll that the separation took on her was disastrous. Her father ended up deciding, her father the king, King Saul, ended up deciding that her marriage to David was no, and he married her off to somebody else. Now the Bible doesn't tell us anything about how she felt about that marriage. I can bet she was probably pretty upset about it. It does tell us the man who married her, her second husband, Palti, was madly in love with her, because when David became king and sent Ishbosheth to go get his wife, Palti followed Ishbosheth, and Michal weeping. Not a very manly thing to do, but he was weeping because she had to go back to David. So by 2 Samuel 6, David is king. He's bringing the Ark of the Covenant home to Jerusalem. He's so grateful. He's so excited that he's leading this worshipful procession, this amazing worship procession. He's leading it, and he's basically stripped down to his what we would say his boxers and maybe a wife beater t-shirt. And he's dancing. He's dancing before the Lord with all of his heart because he's so grateful. And Michal, she looks out and she sees this, and the Bible tells us her heart was filled with content. So she plugged the wrong puzzle piece in where love should have been. What was the aftermath of that? Well, the last thing we hear about Michal is she remained childless the rest of her life. And in that day and age, that was a curse. Now, let's take a look at three of the mothers who got it right. Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but when I hear that phrase, Mary, the mother of Jesus, I imagine somebody who's 20 or 30 years old. And that's probably because I was 29 when I had my first child. We have older mothers giving birth in our society, in our culture these days is not uncommon. But in Bible times, it was very uncommon. And so most Christian scholars believe that Mary was simply a teenager. You have to understand, Jewish customs and laws allowed for young girls as young as 12 years old to be betrothed, and then the wedding ceremony and the consummation would come later. Okay? But we have some clues. The Bible does give us some clues about her maturity and possibly her age range. Number one is her reaction to Gabriel. Be it unto me as you have said. She traveled to her cousin Elizabeth's. The Bible doesn't tell us that her parents went with her. You know, she traveled, and from the story, from the information that's actually given, looks like she traveled by herself. And that beautiful song of praise, the Magnificat, in Luke 1, 38 through 55. Okay, so this paints a picture of a young woman who is very spiritually mature. Still, most likely, she was in her mid to late teens. It would have been considered shameful for her to be in her 20s and not be married. So that's why her choice to allow God to put this puzzle piece in that could literally get her stoned is so astonishing. I don't know about you ladies, but when I was in my mid to late teens, I was not thinking about laying my life down for God. I was too busy living for the devil. You know, I was out there trying to get stoned with pot, not stoned with real stones. Okay. Anna, the prophetess, we know from one little paragraph in Luke 2. I mean, if you blink, you're going to miss Anna. But it's such a sweet story. So we meet Anna when Joseph and Mary are taking the baby Jesus to the temple to be dedicated as required by the law. They're just doing what they have to do. And so she's there. But here's the thing, I want to back up just a little bit on Anna's life. Think about this. When she got married, she was probably like every young girl. All of us probably had similar thoughts. She's going to marry her Prince Charming, she's going to have children, and they're going to live happily ever after. But the Bible tells us that that was not Anna's outcome. Anna lost her husband when they were only married 7 years, and it says nothing about her having children. In fact, the day that her husband died, Anna had to make a decision. What was she going to do? Was she going to trust God and focus on him for the rest of her life, or was she going to take things into her own hands? Well, she decided to trust God for however long her life would be. And what we know is that she spent every waking hour at the temple until she was 84 years old. In verse 38 of Luke chapter 2, we see what her reward was. She came along just as Simeon was talking with Mary and Joseph, and she began praising God. She talked about the child to everyone who had been waiting expectantly for God to rescue Jerusalem. In other words, she got to see the baby Messiah. And she had to wait. That was a very long gap. A very long gap. All right, the last matriarch I want to take a look at is the woman at the well. John 4. So the well in Bible times was a gathering place, a social gathering place for women, kind of like the hair salon or social media would be for us today. But if you read carefully, you notice there were no other women at the well that day. And I don't think that this lady was just running late and didn't get there in time to visit with her friends. I think by looking carefully at the chapter, we see that she had a pretty checkered past. And I think those women probably bullied her, and so she did her best to avoid them. And so she's coming to the well, and Jesus is there. And he's a Jew, and Jews and Samaritans aren't supposed to talk. But he strikes up a conversation with her. Little did she know, she wasn't just there to draw H2O that day. She ended up drawing living water from the King of Kings. And that changed her life. She repented. She started a revival. I mean, it's been said that because she went to the town and she said, "Come meet this man that told me everything I've ever done," that's the reason Philip went to Samaria in Acts 8 when Saul was trying to kill all the Jews. You see, the revival in John 4 led to the foundation for the revival in Acts 8. What if she had decided to listen to that little lie? Jews and Samaritans can't talk to each other. So what can we learn from the matriarchs? Well, we can learn that we cannot look to men or the things of man to fill that God-shaped hole in our hearts. Only God can fill it. We've got to look to God, the author and finisher of our faith. And as we draw near to him and spend time in his presence, reading, praying, worshiping, we will begin to find contentment and fulfillment, even during the storms of life and those long waits. And again, I want to remind you, we have the promise